G'day and welcome to the Inforunners. I'm Execute. Today I'm joined by TortugaJones and Drazz3n. How are you two fellas doing?
Doing good.
You're on camera for once. Last time you guys were on, you were talkie lines.
Yeah, little talkie lines.
So we're going to be doing an episode today on refining, which I think is kind of very topical for the Expanse is still in Q&A as we record this. And I learned a lot from this episode. So much that I learned from this episode that there's another episode coming from the stuff I learnt from this episode that I'm sharing with Algrid at the moment and a few of the other Inforunners. So look forward to that. It was very eye-opening. This was a lot deeper than I thought it was going to be. So I'll just say that off the bat. But I think I'll start with Tortuga. Tortuga, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, so I work at Cortez Gold Mine, which is the 5th largest gold mine in the world. I mostly work in the haulage open pit division, but I do have some knowledge of the gold refining process, which I'm bringing to the show.
I was expecting you to be like covered in bling bling as you said that. Oh yeah, I work at the 5th largest gold. Just the way you were saying it, but yeah, sorry, keep going.
They don't share the gold with us, unfortunately.
Yeah, okay.
Right. But yeah, that's what I do. I work at a big industrial gold mine.
And what about you, Drazz3n? What do you do?
So I am downstream oil and gas. So I work closer with a product that you'd hold in your hands. I'm in the plastics industry. So quite literally anything made out of plastic, I've probably sold a little bit of it here and there. I mainly focus on automotive and medical applications, but at the core, I sell little plastic pellets.
So yeah, because I believe you helped out with some of the logistic episodes too, as well. So yeah,
military and logistics.
Yeah, you
kind of a jack of all trades, I guess.
Yeah, you got quite a varied background there. So
yeah,
we just had that come out of the Q&A too. That's now been confirmed that liquid and gas is a thing. And so basically when we kind of look at you, Drazz3n, you're kind of in the liquid area and Tortuga's kind of in the solids area. So do you want to talk a bit about, maybe we'll go into a little bit more of the processes, or where would you guys like to start?
Sure. I'll go ahead and go first with gold, or kind of any kind of precious metal. Copper's kind of refined the same way as gold is, but you get the stuff out of the ground, and then it can go through a couple different processes. One of the processes is leach refining, where we stack it all on a leach field. We throw some chemicals on it, a sodium cyanide solution, kind of dissolve the gold from the rock. It gets put into a building that combines it with a carbon, and then that's taken over to the refineries, where a bunch of other stuff's added to it to make the big shiny gold bars that you normally see. But we also have a wet milling process and a hot milling process, kind of like what you see in the picture in the background there.
So I'm hearing processes and different types of chemicals to get those processes to work is what I heard there. Is that similar in yours, Drazz3n? Like can we kind of, are there processes and different chemicals and stuff to your processes as well? Or just tell us your process.
Yeah, absolutely. With oil and gas refinery, it deals with a couple different processes. You have heat, which is the primary way of extracting different products from crude oil. But further down in the line, you have additional heat or chemicals being added to continually refine the product down into a semi-finished or finished product. So
the other thing that I found interesting when we talked a little bit before the show was if you look at like Quantanium in the game right now, that basically is like a 1-to-1. But one of the examples you gave me was crude oil. Can you talk about that a bit? Because I found that really interesting.
Absolutely, yeah. So crude oil, you can split it up into at least 7 different parts, sometimes more, just depending on what crude oil you have. But essentially, you apply heat to crude oil from a temperature of 85 degrees Fahrenheit all the way up to over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. There's different boiling points for different products. You can essentially take a barrel of crude and turn it into many, many, many other products just by having a different temperature range operating.
Can I call that a different refinery process? Would that cover it? I'm trying to put it in the same lingo that he was using.
Yeah, well, from the start, we have one singular refinery process. After that, though, it gets a lot more in depth as to what part of the crude oil you're taking. Each different version has a different type of refinery process.
So a multi-stage refinery process.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, absolutely.
And Tortuga, you talked a little bit before the show about silver. Do you want to give us that example as a solid example?
Right. So silver, it kind of comes from a mineral called galena. And you can actually get multiple products out of galena. You can get both lead and silver ore out of that's one singular ore. So you're breaking it down, you're separating the two, and then you're capturing that silver and lead as both a finished product.
And can you tell us a little bit how that is done?
A lot of it has to do with when you take the ore, you're going to crush it into a very fine powder and then add it with water and make a hard slurry mix. And then from there, they're using those different catalysts, the reagents, to separate them out, kind of create like a mineral cake out of them. And then you can more or less get the separate materials in the smelting process using the heat and stuff that they add to the process to get the end result.
Right. So it sounds like they both use heat as a fairly established, because he was mentioning heat as well. So yeah, I'm starting to get an idea of where this is kind of going now. So, yeah. How would you guys see then refining kind of going in game? Like where do you see that going? Like can you give me an example of where you think it would be, or what it would be from your perspective? So Drazz3n, I'll start with you. You tell me what you would think you would see in game. So let's start with the Expanse. What do you think the gameplay would be like on the Expanse, if you were to guess?
Well, assuming we are able to mine something akin to crude oil, still going back to that as a process I'm most, intimately familiar with. You'd take that oil, for instance, that liquid, you'd apply heat to it or chemicals and separate it into a variety of different products. You take maybe one of those products, put them through an additional chemical or heat process, and then further refine it down into yet another product. This can be done over and over, either heat, pressure, or chemicals, until you eventually get to some flake or powder or pellet form, which would then be your final material that maybe it's usable in its state, or maybe it requires one last process with the end user. But it would essentially be refined down into that product and then rebagged or, somehow packaged into a different bag or the same bag to then be shipped off somewhere else. So I could see the Expanse kind of fulfilling a multi-stage distillation and refinery purpose, where you're taking massive amounts of some liquid and then you're ending up with like one SCU of highly refined, highly concentrated in-use product that can be sold for hundreds of thousands of UEC essentially.
Okay. Is it similar for solids, Tortuga? Do you see it operating much the same way in something like this?
So with the solids, you're going to have that whole grinding process or the crushing process of it. The finer you get your material, the easier it is going to be to separate out the desirables from the undesirables. But the longer it's going to take too. So when the Expanse talks about experimenting with different processes to get a different result, you may get a better result that way, but it may take longer. And if you have this continual influx of material, you may need to have a coarser ground process than a finer ground process. That way you can just get that material to move a lot faster.
So this is where my brain's going, because we know that there's a sorter in the mole and there's the big rock tumbler-like thing on the Expanse. So there actually could be that, like, the start of the refining process is actually sorting or crushing, as you're calling it. Refining down, either turning into a slurry, like you said, or so it's not, the actual process itself is multi-stage as well. So you've got to turn it into something that can actually be refined, so to speak. And then there's the actual refinement. But is that only ever for the very first one? I have to ask that, because like what you were talking about with crude oil, Drazz, and you said it's a multi-stage process, but does it need to be prepared every single time, or is it just purely refined?
I mean, yes. I mean, crude oil, one could argue that, yeah, you can use pure crude. There aren't many applications where you would. I mean, 9.5 times out of 10, nobody is just using crude oil unless you're, I don't know, making a bomb or something, I guess. Really, in its form, it is so basic and raw that, you are much better off having it refined into at least something else, applying some heat and just having some other product made from it, in its standard form. You're going to go through at least one refinery process. So
okay, so maybe it needs to just be there for the start of that process, but then after that, down the line. But the other thing I'm definitely hearing is multi-stage. So when I start to look at it now and analyze it on a ship level, like, again, you can see how how linked the Prospector, the Hull A, and the Expanse are, and how that whole system works together. And at the moment, we just have solid mining. If you bring in a liquid miner as well, that mines things kind of like oil, which what Drazz3n is saying, or liquid and gas would be the same thing. There's another ship there as well, potentially. That changes it quite a bit. And the other thing I'm hearing is, because there's only like 6 refineries on the Expanse, as you go up the refinery tree, you're able to do more and more multi-processes, because clearly they have more refineries in them. And I think that's a big epiphany for me. That's a big takeaway. And unlike other ships, like, so let's just look at mining, for example. A Prospector can do everything. A mole can basically have more people and do more because there's more people. If you go right to the top, you've got the Orion, where it just totally dominates space. And what we're assuming is that there's a land miner. So you can clearly see they all have their own little niche. In refining, though, it looks like it gets better and better the bigger it goes up, because you're able to do what the ship under you can do, but you can also do more just sheer numbers and more multi-stage processes. So unlike most ships, it seems to very heavily favor the top end, unless they've found a very creative way to get around it. What would you guys think about me saying it like that?
Yeah, so the way CIG is doing this is a little interesting, because you got a ship that does solid refinery, gas refinery, possibly liquid refinery, right? Those in the real world take very different processes, so there's probably a little bit of that space magic going on there.
Gamification.
Yeah, gamification. But what you're probably going to see out of larger ships is more options to get better results, and then also more throughput as well.
Drazz3n?
No, I'm pretty aligned with him, but I'll add on a bit. Maybe with smaller ships, they can be outfitted to only mine, or only refine, I should say, sorry, very specific things. So maybe you're going out to a system that has, You can't take a big ship down on the planet. It's some thing that you mine on the. It's highly volatile. It can't really be transported. Well, you're going to want a refinery ship on station to be able to handle it and process it for additional transport. I see the smaller ones as maybe being a bit more niche, and the larger ships being more volume focused and economic focused. So,
what about multi-manufacturing? Do you think that's a part of that as well, or?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%.
So something like the Expanse could be more tailored at Quantanium fuel, as an example, or whatever material it's going for. It's more tailored. So they may have to dump stuff that they find because they just or store it off in saddlebags, and then you might get too many. So it's got more choices. It's got to pick and choose what it gets. The other thing I'm realizing too is that like I was worried about refining not being supported enough because it's very heavily reliant on mining. But now when you look at it, you bring in salvage, and you got the liquid and the gas and all that, you've got all those different professions around it feeding that one profession. Totally see that as a thing. Totally works.
Yeah.
It is very weird to have a profession that relies heavily on other professions, but the fact that it relies so heavily on 3 of them at once, not so bad. And I think my camera's just frozen, but keep going. It always happens to me, and it's always in the best view every time.
It's phenomenal.
Yeah. So what do you guys think about the ships though? Like what I was saying about the ships, they to me it looks like they are excuse me, it looks like they are gonna, the bigger the better type of thing, because they can just do everything the ship could do underneath it as well, unless they, as I said, they can come with something creative. But
yeah, I could definitely see it just being more of a scaling thing, but you could also see some specialization. Say with like gas refinery, we got the Starfarer, and it sucks and it refines and it refuels, but maybe you have a ship that's just in space, like the Orion, that only does gas refining. Not so much the refueling process, or if it is refueling, it's restocking Starfarers to go out and restock ships.
I think we've kind of had a tip of the hat to that though, with what the Starfarer only has 3 refineries. So I think it might be the same with the Orion, where it's limited in some capacity. So it might just do the first process to remove. So let's say Quantanium. We know it's volatile. If it can refine it on like right there on the spot, it removes the volatility factor. And that seems to make more sense. So it can do the first stage of the process, but then it hands it off to something like one of the bigger, maybe like a capital refinery ship, so it can do the multi-stage processes. That's where I think it would go. What do you guys think about
that? Yeah, I mean, kind of hopping into what Tortuga was talking about, big, gas refinery ships or, gas mining ships are going to be a lot different from your ore mining ships, are going to be different from your, liquid mining ships. You don't mine oil, you drill for oil, and it's a specific drill bit and a specific process of attaining that. Well, with liquids, you can't go and hit it with a laser. You might set something on fire. It might not even work. So you're going to have drastically different gathering processes along with drastically different refining processes, I would say.
Yeah. And that actually makes a lot of sense. And they did talk about how they can come in as one and go out as the other, and vice versa, or come out the same. So that is very interesting. We know that the Starfarer picks up gas with a scoop, but then I start to think of things like geysers and stuff like that. How are they going to work? Liquids underground, so you can see where I'm going with that. So yeah,
get a big old Slurpee straw, stick it in the ground, hook up your prospector to it, and there you go.
Make sure it's curly.
Yeah. So is there anything else you guys want to add? Because I can see there's a lot of like a lot of where it's going to go there, but I do think a lot of it is still not settled. Let's put it that way.
I think one big thing was, everybody's kind of interested of how much am I going to be able to role play as a refinery worker, and the Expanse Q&A answered at least part of that to some extent, where we may have a predetermined process where we can flip a lever, flip a switch, plug some temperatures in, out of the normal. It'll mostly do stuff, check in on it every 5 minutes, make sure nothing's going wonky, and for the most part, mostly hands off. But the bigger tests kind of handle it. You might not get as much out of it, but then you'll have the guy being the madman behind the curtains, pulling all the levers, monitoring every little change in the process, and he's making a lot more money, but he's also putting in a lot more effort into getting that final product. So I think that was something super interesting.
Yeah, there's one our grids talked about in the past about there's an org that wanted to make their own different fuels. And I actually, like, now you kind of sit there and analyze that to it. Obviously, that's going to be a thing, but it doesn't mean that, like, rather than just making a generalized fuel, you could make a fuel that's perfect for the Super Hornet, a fuel that's perfect for whatever ship you want to use. You could even make one that explodes bigger. You could make one that burns longer. It's way better at burning for long quantum jumps than short ones. Like, but if you use it, I could see all those pros and cons if they want to go that deep. It really could, and that's just fuel. That's not even going into anything else. That's like, like the cows grow 3 times bigger when they eat this hay. And I know I'm saying hay, but you know what I mean. Like, you could take any kind of process, because that refinery process is probably going to go down the line into other manufacturing things. Like, gun bullets, batteries for the lasers, all that type of thing. So you can actually see manufacturing becoming a part of the, like they talked about the super collider in the Endeavor, and how you could make your own modules and buff them with the super collider. So to me, there is a link there between that super collider crafting process and refining, and then there's something in the middle of a crafting system that we just haven't seen yet. And I mean,
it's really interesting because we have, fuel. You can have different levels of ethanol which perform better, and maybe your more average engines and the higher performing engines can take a higher ethanol percentage, and that would be really cool seeing some kind of process like that where you have this highly refined fuel which is going to make your ship go faster, or it can just sip on the fuel and you get more out of a tank. It's a higher cost, but you'll get further with it. That would be really cool to see.
Now, I know we're talking about fuels, but is there anything like that, Tortuga, that you could think of that might come in with more solid stuff, like where it's a part of that manufacturing process?
The one thing that comes off the top of my mind is in the gold refining process, we actually add a lot of extra stuff, zinc and copper, some other minerals, and when we have our gold bar, it actually has a molecular code. So if you went and took a sample of a gold bar somewhere in the world, we would be able to tell you exactly what mine it was refined at.
Like a fingerprint.
Right, like a fingerprint. And then you're going to have ores that are going to be like not a solid iron ore. Maybe it's a mix, an alloy mix that has different properties in it by adding some stuff. Maybe some of those other ores that we see in the game.
I'm just going to put this out there, but does that fall into bounty hunting territory, or about tracking people and stuff? Like,
well, it might fall more under the piracy thing about tracking.
But you know what I mean?
No, but they stole it from.
But so there's a pirate that's used it, but the bounty hunter uses it to track him to find out where he got it from, or where he's been, or something like that. Wow.
Okay. I mean, it's a possibility, yeah. But I see more of the alloys being used in like strengthening components, making them perform differently, better cooling properties with this metal versus this metal kind of deal.
So it almost does kind of sound like, especially like if you take the fuel example and expand that out, it's almost going to pay for people to be able to test and find things. They may, like as CIG over time, may hide things. If people can get that mixture just right, they might find something like a discovery, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, well, possibly.
I think we can also kind of expand on, there are a lot of ship manufacturers out there. Maybe a certain ship manufacturer has a a better process to generically speak, whereas you might be on a MISC refinery ship and it is heavily automated. It can do everything for you. Modern day refineries, you don't have a lot of people sitting around adjusting dials all the time. You plug it in and it plays and you just sit there and monitor. You might have other ships that aren't as great as that. You actually have to sit there and, you know, make sure things don't go all wonky. So
and I can also see them putting like recipes, so to speak, behind reputation walls. So if you have a certain reputation with a certain faction, they will give you their recipe and stuff like that.
That'd be cool.
Yeah. And that would kind of fall under that automated process too, right? You don't want to sit there and adjust the temperatures and adjust your catalysts and your reagents. Well, have your reputation up with a certain refinery station. They may share one of those processes with you, so you can just plug it into your ship's computer and just do it automatically.
Well, they've also said that it's quicker if you do it yourself, but it's also safer if you do it automatically. So, yeah, I think you'll get a more what's the word I'm looking for? Like across the board, more stable, percentage if you just let the process do it. But if you stuff with it, it looks like it's going to be a little bit like this. So you might get a bit of inconsistency in your fuel, but it will be done faster. So a time versus money thing, if you will.
And who's to say that you can't take those processes that you discover by playing around with it and putting it on a data chip and going and selling it as part of like data running and data transfer?
So I think we've hit like 5 or 6 different gameplays at this point. But yeah, they are the one thing I am learning, having done this, like as Drazz3n was kind of saying, he's been on multiple shows now. You've been on multiple shows now. They are all cross-referencing each other and are interconnected, and it's showing a very deep system across the board.
Right. I'm actually very happy with the whole refinery gameplay loop, because it does connect a lot of different current and future gameplay loops. And I think somebody could make quite a lifestyle at being a refinery operator.
That is true. Drazz3n, anything you want to add there?
No, I 100% agree with Tortuga. I think for the folks that are, really excited to take some raw goods and refine it, either gathering them themselves or just offering that service, they're going to have a really rich, interesting gameplay loop, a way for them to make money and have a lot of fun in the verse, especially, which is really what it's all about. So it sounds really cool. It sounds like what we have is like the first iterative process. And as we've discussed, there's still a lot of other ships we've yet to see, a lot of other processes that have yet to come out. A lot of people kind of assume that, the whole mining and refining is one of the better things that we have more information about, but we've only scratched the surface. I think overall it shows us how deep they could go with other professions as well, So as Drazz3n was alluding to there, the other episode that I was saying that came out of this one is all the ships that it kind of brought out. So we're going to do an episode on all the potential ships that we didn't even know existed. That really became very clear after the talks and discussion on this episode. The other thing I want to point out is the sound has been a little bit wonky in this episode. That's because Tortuga's on Starlink and Drazn''s on Flannel Link, and they're just a little bit sketchy. So yeah, so I apologize if there's a little bit of sound issues there, but we make do. So do you do streaming or anything, or Tortuga? You don't, do you? Not yet, anyway.
No, I don't.
But you're looking.
Not yet.
Okay, not yet. So we'll plug that. We can come back and put it in the description. Drazn', is there anything you want to plug?
Yeah, go follow Space Tomato.
So I'm
just free marketing, man.
Yeah. You're basically you're Drazn''s like head mod type guy, aren't you? Oh no, I mean Space.
I do everything.
Space Tomato's head mod type guy. I called you your own top mod guy. That's how tired I am. Right? Yeah. No, but you're Space Tomato's head top mod guy. Yeah.
I do everything. I help him run his org. I give him ideas. I play Halo with him. You name it, I probably do it.
Wipes his backside. There you go.
Wipe my backside. Yeah.
All right.
Tomato juice everywhere.
All right. So this has been this episode. Like this episode if you like this episode. Leave us comments, suggestions. I'd like to hear things like what do you guys think about that gameplay? And I just love how it seems to touch everything, every other gameplay. It was really strong to me. It came across, and again, the epiphany with the ships. You'll see that in another episode because he just showed so many other ships that I wasn't even aware of. So that's a whole nother kettle of fish that goes off into a different episode. But yeah, is there any questions that you'd like to hear from people in the comments, Drazz3n or Tortuga?
No, not really. I'd just like to hear what they think of how the future of refining is going to go, and if there's any other tie-ins that they think would go well with this ship or this process.
I'd love to hear if folks want to see a more hands-on way of doing things, or if they would like to see something more automated, or maybe, as we've alluded to, maybe a little bit of both. Would you be happy to see both of those in game?
Yeah, I think it is going to be a bit of both. Myself, personally.
I think so as well.
Yeah, I'd like to hear that too.
Yeah.
All right. With that, then, he's been Drazz3n, he's been TortugaJones, I've been Execute, and we'll catch you in the next one.